it's me. I went on a hike or whatever. Here's Bestie. All right, here's the view. Wow. All right, let's go do drugs.
Hey people watching on your computer screens, it is 420 somewhere, number 30, and we have a few stories today. The first one is kind of about psychedelics. I like to every once in a while dip into that territory and talk about what is going on in that world, and it's almost always the same, which is that more and more people are coming around to the idea of using psychedelics as treatment for depression or post-traumatic stress. And in particular today, the reason that this is coming up is because a new study was posted in, in Nature Medicine, I believe today, that shows a pretty strong correlation between MDMA and that helping people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And the only difference between this study and studies of the past that kind of show the same thing is this one is much more rigorous, and there's a very clear difference between the effects of the MDMA as opposed to the placebo in this study in particular. So this one's coming out in a journal today and should kind of turn a lot of heads if there are enough heads that are actually reading it, which, I don't know if there are a lot of heads that actually read journals, but that's a good sign. In total, more and more of these studies are coming out that all basically show the same thing, that not just psychedelics, MDMA, are being used for treating depression and are much more effective than some typical treatment. It is said that about 7% of Americans suffer from some depression, and 1% of Americans are treatment resistant, meaning that they are resistant to the antidepressants that they're given. That's a pretty large amount of that 7%, and I think a lot of these psychedelics can target that audience in particular. There's a question as to whether or not this would ever become the primary source of care, and it's looking like while maybe within the next decade we will see a lot more of this open up. There's going to be, Oregon just passed it through a ballot in 2020, and we're probably going to see it in more states, but it probably will still remain an alternative source of treatment for depression for at least another couple decades, just because of it's unfortunate to say, but just because of the large infrastructure that has been created around antidepressants over time and pills and things like that. Also, there's going to be a pretty large price tag in the beginning. They say I read this in CNBC, and I'm not exactly sure if they mean the price tag of prolonged treatment or of like a one-time visit to therapy, but they say it could be between $10,000 and $20,000. That right off the bat is cutting a whole lot of people out. But mainly I just wanted to point out that MDMA study that has just been released, and that, we're going to see more and more of these studies come out that just get people more on board with the idea of doing it. And soon we're going to see legislation pop up in probably California next and other states soon after.
Have you ever smoked weed and then got really cold? It's a phenomenon called THCInduced hypothermia. Let's talk about it. So in my last video, I mentioned that we have a receptor in our body that can be activated by either hot showers or heat from a really hot day. But the same receptor can be activated by molecules like cannabinoids as well. So let's say it's a really hot day. The heat from outside is going to activate that receptor, and then that's going to tell our body that we probably need to cool down a little bit because it's really hot out. But since cannabinoids activate the same receptor, that sort of tricks our body into thinking that it's really hot and it needs to calm down. So it lowers our body temperature. Cannabis also lowers your blood pressure, which could make you feel colder.
And since we're on the topic of research, we can talk about some marijuana research changes that have just happened. The National Institute on Drug Abuse have just released a regulatory amount of THC use in studies. So they're saying that before it was kind of a mad dash and you can do whatever you wanted, and there were different milligrams of THC being used in different studies. Now they're saying that there is going to be one anchor point of THC levels, and that's going to be 5 milligrams. So you can deviate from that 5 milligrams, but that is going to be where things start and where everything will be judged upon. It just points to it having a more official feeling source of research and anything in marijuana. So the fact that there is that kind of anchor point of 5 milligrams is very helpful, I think, for a lot of studies, because they were so hard to kind of compare because of the different kinds of milligrams being used. And of course, it's not a neutral amount. Like, it's going to change, the milligrams are going to change depending on how they're being used. Like 5 milligrams of an edible is very different from 5 milligrams being smoked, as opposed to 5 milligrams being drank. It still is an anchor point, and it's going to be a lot more helpful for studies to be able to compare to each other. Very quickly, some legalization news. Alabama has approved medical legalization, and it's on the way to the governor's desk. I believe he's going to sign that. Nebraska, also same with medical marijuana. They are on the process of getting it in front of the full legislation. That should happen this week. So those two right-leaning, it seems like so long ago that we're even thinking about medical marijuana being legal, but those two right-leaning states, they are now kind of on the process of legalizing medical marijuana, which would make the tally pretty high. I think it's got to be a big majority of states now that would have medical marijuana legal. But so that's the news for the legalization today, happening over the week, and that's all for today. So we'll see you on Wednesday.